don't know. Do you call it news? I'm talking about the Jon Jones, the VADA test, and the still positive for steroids. And I mean, do you call it news? Where do you go from here? I will tell you, as I dig into this, let's just get to the conclusion right off the bat. The conclusion is they are correct. They are correct in their analysis and determination that Jon Jones is having residue. He's having leftover trace amounts from a substance of which he was already punished for. That is true. And they are right to also conclude that there was no re-ingestion. Where I don't know if they're right, and notice my words there, I'm not saying they're wrong. I could for sure tell you it's not how they explained it, but I don't know the actual statute. I know the way they explained it to everybody in the USADA pool was this: if you're coming off of a failed test, you must have X amount of time of clean tests. In Jon's case, because he was a previous offender, that would be 6 months. That is the exact same thing that you're seeing Brock Lesnar go through. The reason Brock, when he said he was coming back, but they couldn't do it immediately, was because he was removed from the pool, so he needed to then serve his 6 months of clean tests. Now, Jon was doing that in theory concurrently with the suspension, because unlike Brock, Jon stayed in the pool. If you will remember, when Brock was hot at UFC 200, he then retired from the sport. When he retired, it removed him from the pool. So to regain a license, he had to regain access to the pool and get these 6 months of good tests behind him. Okay, so Jon was able to do that concurrently. However, those tests were not clean for 6 months. He did not have that. And that was one of the big questions as to why can he fight in California. And it was also why Nevada said he cannot fight here. And you can roll out the backstory all you want and rework that story all you want about the commissioners weren't in town and the holidays and this. The answer was no. And the fight was removed and he was not given a license. And that is why. The reason this becomes relevant is because now that he has failed a VADA test, which was very interesting because California required that he take the VADA test. It was a California requirement, which meant they would be granted access to the results of the test, which is another moving part of this story because they were not granted results from the USADA test. Now, they could have shared it. They publicly shared it, and that is how California found out about it. But they were not given the actual results, which does change things a little bit. A little bit. Because it is very interesting that California would call for such a test to detect steroids in one system, find out that, yes, the test came back and the steroids were in the system, but we're okay with it. That's of interest. That's a talking point. Why do the test and find out that a guy still has steroids? And I don't also know where. And again, I must say it again, I'm not forming an opinion. I'm just saying I don't know where within the rules it would be. There seems to be a hanging of the hat on the argument that because it was not re-ingested, there was no new intent. That's reasonable. But I'm not sure that's what the rule is. The rule says, as it's been explained, you must have 6 months of good tests, and when you show up on fight night, you must be clean. Does not say anything about the day you were caught and a re-ingestion, to the point that it has been explained extremely clearly of certain substances not to take because they can stick around in your body. And if they do stick around in your body, caught in a liver, caught in a kidney, caught in a fat cell, and they just simply can't get out of your butt, you're just not eligible for license. That's the way it was explained. I do get the new argument, though. And one thing about this is we're going to fiercely adhere to the rules that we make up on the spot. I'm not sure that shouldn't be the new rule. If he did not re-ingest after he was punished, I'm not sure there shouldn't be a little bit of a discussion on that. But now the question comes down to how did 3 agencies test him all in the same night and 2 of them missed it? I'm a little confused why there isn't a spotlight and a question mark on how USADA, with an $11 million yearly budget, missed it on the same night that California, who then submitted it to the WADA lab at UCLA, missed it. But VADA, who collected the sample on the same night, submitted it to the same lab, caught it. I don't know how that works. I don't suggest for you guys that there's foul play there, not in the least. I would just ask you, how does that work? How did they not catch it? How is the same thing being done at the same laboratory and they're missing it? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of that, but I think that it does put Nevada squarely in a spot to have to make a decision. And I don't think it's as simple in Nevada as, well, we've got some experts, and they all say that there would be no enhancement from it and there was no re-ingestion. I don't think they can go on that because I don't think that's what the rule is. I believe the rule is you must show up clean on fight day. End of story. I only think that's the rule because that's how it was verbally explained to everybody many different times, not only by the commission but by USADA itself. It appears, as you look closer at the rules, that there's a workaround or that the rule has changed. So we'll see what happens there with Jon, but I could only imagine, again, just to use Brock, a guy that's in a similar spot, if he did not come in with 6 months of absolutely crystal clear, clean tests, he is not going to get a license. I can't imagine that he would. And I can't recall any other athlete that was in this same spot. At least not in MMA. There was a gal in tennis, and I can't remember the substance of it. It's very popular amongst the Russians. At the Olympic Games, for example, when the Russians are often flagged, they're often flagged for the same substance. I just can't pronounce it. But it helps oxygenate your blood. And there was a tennis player. It was not illegal in tennis. They changed the rule, unannounced, just announced that it was changed, and then came in and tested her. Now, she had been using it appropriately with a doctor for years, and it was within the rules. And she came out and said, yes, I do believe you that that is in my system as it's leaving my system. However, you changed that rule, and I have not re-ingested it. In fact, if you check the trace amounts and you check the number of metabolites, you will see that it is leaving my body. You changed that rule X amount of time ago. I am arguing for you. I have not taken it since the rule changed. But I will concede for you it's within my system right now. It won't be for long, but it is for now. They gave her a 2-year ban. That 2-year ban effectively ended her career. All of her sponsors left, and when the 2 years was up, she never came back. That was a big player, too. If I produced her name for you, you guys would know exactly who it was. So there is a bit of a precedent set there, but that also comes down to a determination by the governing body. To say what they did in tennis is what they need to do in MMA is not a fair comparison. I'm just pointing out a comparison that has happened, where that is a very real thing, and I think that that would change many people's minds, and there does need to be some consideration for that. There's a number of substances that pop up on the banned list that there is no warning for. And the person who did it prior cannot be looked as violating the rule. While I think you guys would unanimously agree with me on that does make sense. If you took something and it wasn't against the rules and now all of a sudden a new law pops up, if you will, as it's leaving your system, there should be consideration. But the way tennis looked at it is the exact same way that they explained to us MMA would look at it, which is, even if we do not punish you, you are not eligible for license. You cannot play the game. We won't punish you for it. We won't suspend you, but come back and see us when this is gone. Now, that's apparently not the rule because that's not even the spot that Jon is going to have to be looking at when he gets before the Nevada Commission at the end of this month to move on and have his fight in March with Anthony Smith. That's not the spot. We know that because this evidence and information was out there in California. They licensed him. It came back. It's still there, and they're still not going to do anything. So there is something new to learn here. I'm just asking a question, not giving an answer to it because I don't know, but I'm asking the question, when did that change? And if there wasn't a meeting and a hearing and minutes taken and new rules passed, then perhaps that rule never changed. And perhaps they just explained it wrong to everybody from the beginning. Which would make you wonder, from Joe Warren to Nick Diaz to potentially with Brock Lesnar, if there is some level of residue and something left over. Why was Joe Warren and Nick Diaz's license held up? And would Brock's be? Or would Brock be able to go in there and compete anyway? So Alexander Gustafsson weighed in on this, and he said, the inconclusive and inconsistent results that are repeatedly occurring with Jon Jones, at the very least, should compel our industry to have a greater, deeper, and more impartial discussion about the legitimacy of Jon's defense. Jon has gone out publicly boasting when some of his results come back negative. However, he remains silent when his test results come back positive. You cannot have it both ways and cherry pick the results that are favorable for you and insist that we disregard the results that go against your interests. Jon has essentially received a use exemption on the strict liability violation. The science is not certain on the defense he has taken. Furthermore, science is always in a state of change. So the science we rely on today is different than the science we will rely on from just a few years ago, and it will probably change again going forward. Jones is also creating a precedent that will go well beyond his personal interest, in the sense that now other fighters will also seek use exemptions on a strict liability violation based on an issue that the science community is still divided on. This is an absolute mess. Sorry for my reading of that. I was trying to go line by line there on my iPhone. I think it's really well said. I mean, ultimately, you do come back to the same conclusion, though. This is really just something that's fun to talk about. I mean, it's hot and it's topical and it's something fun to talk about. They got it right. And that's not, people aren't going to love that answer all the time, but they did get it right, at least in regards to, Jon is not retaking this and he is not re-ingesting it. He has not ingested it since he was already found guilty of ingesting it and was punished. That is right. But is that the rule? Is that what the rule is? Because Nevada kicked it. California took it. Now Nevada's about to look at that again. I like what Gus said. I mean, look, guys, Jon was underpunished, right? Jon was supposed to receive a minimum of 2 years because of being a secondary offender. Also how the rules were explained, but once again, we will change them on the spot. So we did. So he served 15 months. That's a talking point, because this picogram business will not be here in 24 months. We're now 16 months in. In 8 months, he will not still have a picogram. So had he served the 24 months that he was supposed to serve, we're not even having this conversation. And it does set a precedent. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think you could look at it both ways. What about that story of that tennis player I just told you, where the rule wasn't even against the rule until it was against the rule? And then you could look a little bit closer at that. What she was taking was a medically prescribed legal substance, meaning she could be in possession of it and ingest it and do everything else openly out in society. Jon is testing positive for an illegal steroid. Illegal meaning against the law. You could not possess it. Openly in the public, they would put you in handcuffs. But the way the rules seem to work, have chosen to work, I don't mean seem, this is exactly how they work. But all substances are created the same. Advil, which has cost people time in the sport of MMA, but also Olympians gold medals before. Caffeine, in the form of 2 espresso shots, 15 minutes prior to testing, you will test positive for caffeine. They will all be treated the same. An illegal drug, an illegal steroid, or a legal medication, if it's on the banned list, they are all treated the same. And the one thing that has always made the USADA process very fair is whether you like the rule or you don't not like the rule, here's what the rule is, and we are going to adhere to it if you are within this pool. If you want to fight outside of the pool or compete or do an athletic event outside of the pool, that's okay too. But for our pool, you got to be clean. No ifs, ands, or buts. No exceptions. Well, now all of a sudden we have an exception, and it's not only an exception for a banned substance, it's for an illegal substance. And not only is that substance illegal, it is a steroid. The reason I keep going back to steroids, when I was growing up, that's all you weren't supposed to do. We used to take classes on that in middle school, in high school, in college. Don't take steroids. Somewhere along the way, that changed to don't take performance-enhancing drugs, PED'S, PED'S. That was a tough one. That was a narrative that never should have come up. Because all medicine is performance-enhancing. If you were to go to the doctor and say, Doc, I'm feeling great. Do you have anything that could bring me down and make me worse? That would be known as malpractice. To get FDA clearance, to get DEA clearance, to get medical clearance in the United States of America, you must prove that you are going to make a patient better. Performance enhancing. So that was always a little bit of a tough one. And then they started pulling things in from every which possible angle to where it wasn't just illegal steroids and it wasn't just enhancing medications. It was also then supplements. Caffeine, by example. Advil, by example. I keep going back to those just because you guys will recognize them and go, Chael, you got to be kidding me. You get the same ban for having 2 shots of espresso 15 minutes before they test you as you would for an illegal, imprisonable steroid? Yeah, I'm not making the rule. I'm just telling you, they're all created the same. And there's always a big confusion as well. If anybody ever gets flagged on one of these tests, in the eyes of the media, he was always taking steroids, illegal steroids. In some cases, that's true. In this case, that would be true. But I will tell you, I told you guys this right when Jon got hit 16 months ago. I said, if Jon is innocent, because Jon was workshopping the story of, I have no idea. I didn't take anything and I have no idea where this came from. And he was sticking to that. And he was even hey, I'll take a lie detector's test. I'll cough up some tears for you guys. I've never even heard of this stuff before. Well, he was telling the truth. All of that was true. He was taking a different banned substance that was contaminated with this banned substance. So when this one came out, he's sitting there with his pants down going, man, I've never even heard of that. I feel like I'm being victimized. I never took that. Well, he was telling the truth, intent-wise. I could get more into detail. I won't. I could tell you specifically what he was doing and how he was doing it. But the point is, it was contaminated with this, and it's not the first time that has happened. Not even the first time at the gym that he's training at that has happened. So, you're in a bit of a spot. And when you're hanging your hat on, I have no idea. Silly me, no idea, blind defense. Come along this journey with me. Turn on me if you will, but this is the game I'm going to play. When you're doing that, a reasonable conclusion to that, if you were in fact an innocent person, is that you would be continuing to get the same result over and over again, right? So many guys will come out and go, I'm innocent, I have no idea how this happened. And then for the rest of their life, they'll be tested and they'll never get that same result. Well, that's what a guilty guy would do. A guilty guy who's lying and saying, I don't know where it came from, will then go and change his behavior and thus change the outcome. An innocent guy would keep getting the same outcome over and over and over again because he just wouldn't know where it came from. So, guys, I never found this. I don't know where it came from. I'm not taking anything. I don't know how I'm living. I don't know what the science is. I don't know where this is coming from. But I'm going to continue to do those same behaviors. So I would expect that I'm going to continue to get the same results because I'm innocent, at least of intent. I did tell you guys that right when this happened. I don't know if this fully qualifies as to what happens here, but I at least need to bring it up in fairness to Jon. In fairness to Jon, if I was willing to convict him 16 months ago on the silly me, I have no idea. Oh, and by the way, it's never going to be in my system again. That doesn't work. If it's silly me and I have no idea, it had damn sure better be in your system again and again and again and again. because you were innocent. You were unable to identify where it came from. I like what Gus said about science. I like that he said the science of today is not the science of yesterday, and it won't be the science of tomorrow. There is such a misconception in this world about the word science. The word science is supposed to mean absolute. People will use it as absolute on all cases. Whether the one we're talking about or a prosecution to try to put somebody in prison and then go, well, we have the science. This is junk science at the highest of levels. And Gustafsson is exactly right. It is supposed to be perfect and absolute, and what is true today will be true forever because it is science. That is what they will preach to you. You got to be smarter than that. Gus is correct. The science they use today is not what science was yesterday with the same determinations and the same factors. And in several years from now, that science will change yet again. It is junk science at the highest of level. And I love to pick on science. And whenever I do, you guys always pick on me. You hate when I do it. You hate when I do it. But you can never refute the point that I make for you, which is I am 40 years old. In my entire life, I have never met a gentleman and said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a scientist. At 40 years old, I never grew up with a kid ever in my life. Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a scientist. Never. It's never happened. Ever. And it hadn't happened to you guys either. And none of you are scientists. You guys love to push back on me and go, Chael, how can you say that? That's ridiculous. Science is science. Okay, great. Tell me someone you know that's a scientist. Tell me somebody in your family, in your neighborhood you went to school with, somebody you work with. Tell me any of you. There's 500,000 of you out there listening to this show. One of you, please come forward as a scientist. Oh, I noticed nobody's moved. Do you see the problem? It's a bogus industry. It's based on junk. And it's based along one premise, which is, yeah, but nobody else will know. Nobody else is claiming to be a scientist. If the 6 of us can get together and call us a science club, we can come out with whatever we want. And the other guys, they're not interested enough to try to prove us wrong. And if there's no defense, then guess who wins? The only one with an offense. That's how it works. And you're seeing in this business, the experts. Okay, the experts. And they're experts, and they must remain anonymous, by the way. Okay, so you've got an anonymous expert. All right, good enough. Well, let me ask you this, since you won't bring the expert forward, and I can't talk to him, and I can't deduce anything from him. Will you at least tell me the little initials next to his name? Is there an MD? Is there a DO? Is there even a PhD in the room? A fake doctor, by the way. A fake doctor, PhD. But I'll take it. Do any of your experts have that? You see the problem. The answer is no, and that's the real reason why they don't come forward. The real reason they don't come forward is they're not going to come with any credibility. And the truth is, in this space, those are the greatest experts. The greatest experts are the guys that did trial and error. The dirty, filthy gym rats taking the dirty, filthy substances and then looking at themselves and their peers around them and were able to deduce what happened and come out and tell you are your best experts. I would put the leading expert in this country as Victor Conte. I think you guys would agree with me, but he would not qualify to any of my previous asked questions of MD, DO, or PhD. He has the most helpful acronym next to his name, which is incarcerated felon. But he dealt in this. He made a living off this. He created Olympic and world champions off of this. He took Shane Mosley to the highest of levels. He took Barry Bonds to the highest of levels. He took Marion Jones to the highest of levels. I'm not bragging about any of that for him. I am just saying, yeah, he's an expert. He's done it. He lived it. He didn't just sit there and read about it. He didn't go in and learn about this in books somewhere and come out and regurgitate it. He saw it. He helped to write those books. He is the leading expert, at least on name notoriety. If he says it, you can count on it. But you will also see the problem where when they want to hang their hat around being an unquestionable, impenetrable unit of science, it's junk. And by the way, guys, being a scientist, just for the record, for you guys that push back whenever I go on my anti-science rants and you think I sound like a loon over here, it's not like becoming a doctor. It's not like becoming a lawyer. It's not even like getting a teaching certificate and becoming a teacher just by example. It is purely self-proclaimed. There is no degree you have to obtain to be able to functionally call yourself a scientist. There is no dissertation you have to do, lecture, fellowship, nothing that you have to do to become a scientist. You don't have to go to a 4-star, 4-year accredited university and major in science. I would imagine if you did, you could call yourself a scientist. I would imagine you could, but you could also not do that and claim to be a scientist. You could write a book. You could get it published and put on the cover of the book, scientist. It's junk science at the highest of levels because we understand. And I hope you guys understand the point. Do I need to conclude this point? The point for you is quite relevant, which is if you're in an industry that is based on junk science and you know that, and to the point that Gustafsson just made, which was completely accurate and fair, which is the rules of yesterday in science are not the rules of today, and we know that they will evolve and not be the rules of tomorrow. If you understand this hot seat of an industry and a business and a pool that you're in, then you must always adhere to the default mechanism, which is like it or not. To be in this pool, it is pass or fail. You are dirty or you are clean. Unless you are clean, you are dirty. And we may not even call you a bad person, and we may not even call you bad intent, but we will exclude you from this pool. That is the overarching and overwhelming consensus that they have come to, that they have built a reputation on. And that's the way they've explained it. Perhaps that needs to be revisited. Perhaps that is being revisited right now. I don't have an opinion for you. I just want you guys to have the information. I am seeing Jon falsely disparaged for having retaken bad substances. That's not true. The conclusion in the analysis is accurate, that this is residue that is left over. My conclusion and analysis that he was under-punished, and had he been given the appropriate sentence, and I'm not cheering against him, by the way. I'm just a guy looking at the rules that understands that on your second violation, you have a minimum of 2 years. Had they gone through with that, we wouldn't be in this spot. And it is a matter of how far are people willing to dig. And maybe they're not. Maybe they're willing to let it go away. But all the way down to Jon Jones being a rat, taking a clause to help out, turned out not to be true. He took the deal. He had no information. He's never going to obtain information. He was never meant to do that. That was absolutely meant to catch a loophole within the rules and get it applied. Form your own opinion on them allowing that to happen.